In the sweltering heat of a deserted Arizona highway, a billionaire's car breaks down without warning. He grows furious, shouting at the engine, until a poor boy appears, offering help. With dirty hands and a steady gaze, the boy gets the engine roaring to life again, in seconds. What seemed like an act of charity reveals a talent that will forever change both of their destinies. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The midday sun punished the highway that cut through the Texas hill country like a sharp, relentless blade. The asphalt shimmered with a heat that made the air tremble, creating mirages of water that never existed. It was one of those afternoons when even the birds seemed to give up on flying, seeking shade on any dry branch that still held out against the arid landscape. The road was empty, without a single car in sight, only the hot wind that lifted the red dust from the shoulders and scattered it like smoke over the cracked earth. Robert Miller never imagined he would go through this. Sitting on the Italian leather seat of his metallic grey Mercedes, he was sweating inside his bespoke suit that cost more than many families earned in a year. The air conditioning had stopped working along with the engine, and now the car's interior felt like an oven. He turned the key for the 10th time, maybe the 15th. He had already lost count. The engine coughed, groaned, but wouldn't start. Just that frustrating sound of an expensive machine refusing to obey. Robert hit the steering wheel with the palm of his hand, more out of impulse than anger. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to not being in control. At his company, a single word from him was enough to set hundreds of people in motion. In restaurants, he just had to walk in for the waiters to rush over. In his world, everything worked because he had the power to make it work. But there, on that forgotten road, surrounded only by the suffocating silence and unbearable heat, Robert Miller was just a man without answers. He picked up his cell phone for the 20th time. Nothing. No signal. The screen showed those empty bars that seemed to mock him. He tried to call the office, his private driver who should have come with him, anyone. Nothing. The modern world, with all its technology and instant connection, had vanished. He was alone, truly alone, and that was a feeling he hadn't experienced in so long he had almost forgotten what it was like. Robert opened the door and got out of the car, feeling the heat hit his face like a slap. He looked around. Ahead, the road stretched until it disappeared into the horizon. Behind him, the same thing. To the sides, only dry scrub, a few crooked trees, and old fences marking properties that looked abandoned. There were no houses, no gas stations, no anything. He started walking around the car, as if that might reveal some magical solution. He opened the trunk, but all he found was his briefcase of documents and a half-empty bottle of water. That's when he heard the noise, a metallic sound, faint but rhythmic, something like coins clinking against each other. Robert turned his head and saw in the distance a small figure walking along the side of the road. At first, he thought it was a mirage, another illusion created by the heat. But the sound continued and the figure became clearer. It was a boy, small, thin, covered in dust from head to toe. He was holding an old dented soda can and shaking it as he walked. The sound was coming from there, from the few coins rattling inside. The boy couldn't have been more than 9 years old, maybe not even that. He wore a faded t-shirt, too big for his frail body, and shorts torn at the hems. His feet were shoved into flip-flops that seemed to be falling apart with every step. His dark hair, cut haphazardly, was stuck to his forehead with sweat. But it was his eyes that caught the attention. Even from a distance, even through the dust and fatigue, those eyes seemed to be aware of everything, observing, calculating, understanding the world in a way that didn't match his age. The boy stopped a few yards away from the car and looked at Robert. He didn't say anything, just stood there, shaking the can slightly, waiting. Robert looked back, not quite sure what to do. He was used to dealing with businessmen, investors, lawyers, but a street kid, in the middle of nowhere, holding a can of coins, this was new. "Mister, you having car trouble?" The boy's voice was thin but steady. It had that soft Texan drawl, mixed with something Robert couldn't identify. Maybe it was just the strange maturity of someone who learned to survive too early. Robert almost laughed. Almost. but he held back the impulse. Yes, the car stopped. It won't start. He made a vague gesture with his hand as if explaining something obvious. And you're not going to be able to help me, kid. This is high-end technology. I need a tow truck. The boy tilted his head, still holding the can. Can I take a look? I know about engines. Robert couldn't hold back the laugh this time. It was a short laugh, more of disbelief than mockery. You? You're what? 9 years old? This isn't a toy car. It's an imported Mercedes. It has an onboard computer, electronic, fuel injection, systems you don't even know the names of. I know the names. The boy took a step forward. Electronic fuel injection, ignition system, fuel pump, infotainment center, oxygen sensor. Want me to keep going? Robert blinked, surprised. The boy spoke with a confidence that didn't match his appearance. It wasn't arrogance. It was knowledge. It was the voice of someone who knew exactly what he was talking about, even if the world around him insisted on not believing it. All right. Robert crossed his arms, still skeptical. If you know so much, tell me what's wrong. The boy approached the car and stopped in front of the hood. Can I open it? Robert gestured for permission, more out of curiosity than hope. The boy pulled the internal lever that Robert had forgotten about, and the hood popped open with a soft click. The boy got closer, stood on his tiptoes, and began to look at the engine with the focus of a surgeon examining a patient. He didn't touch anything at first, just observed. His eyes scanned every cable, every connection, every part, as if he were reading a map only he could decipher. Robert stood beside him, watching. There was something almost hypnotic about the way the boy worked. He wasn't rushed. He didn't hesitate. Every movement seemed calculated. Every glance seemed to understand something that Robert, with all his money and power, couldn't see. After a few seconds, the boy pointed. See here, mister. This cable here is a little loose, and this valve right here, see, it's a bit dirty. The heat must have made it stick. If I clean that and reconnect it right, it should start up again. Robert was silent. Part of him still didn't believe it. But another part, a small, forgotten part, that still remembered when he himself was young and had to fight for everything, that part wanted to believe. You can try, Robert said, his voice softer now. The boy nodded and reached his hands into the engine. He had small but nimble fingers. He moved a cable here, adjusted a part there, cleaned a valve with the hem of his own t-shirt. Robert saw him reconnect something near the battery, tighten a loose connection, and give a final touch to a part that seemed insignificant. The boy stepped back, wiped his hands on his clothes, and looked at Robert. Try starting it now. Robert didn't answer. He just got into the car, put the key in the ignition, and turned it. For a second, nothing happened. The engine groaned, coughed, hesitated. But then, as if waking from a deep sleep, it caught. The smooth, powerful sound of the Mercedes filled the air, and the air conditioning came back on, blowing a cool breeze that seemed to bring life back. Robert sat there, holding the steering wheel, feeling the engine purr beneath him. He couldn't believe it. A 9-year-old boy, barefoot and covered in dust, had fixed in minutes what he, with all his corporate knowledge, couldn't even understand. He got out of the car and looked at the boy, who was already carefully closing the hood. How did you learn that? My dad. The boy looked down, and for the first time, Robert saw a shadow of sadness cross his face. He was a mechanic, worked at an old garage near our house. I used to hang out there with him, watching him work on cars. He taught me, said I had a knack for it. And does he still work there? The boy shook his head slowly. No, mister. He passed away about 2 years ago. It's just me and my mom now. Robert felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't pity. It was something else. It was recognition. It was the realization that right in front of him was someone who had lost far more than he ever would, but who still had the strength to keep going, to learn, to help. How much do you want? Robert asked, taking his wallet from his pocket. For the repair. The boy looked at the wallet but didn't move. Whatever you can give is fine. I'm just trying to save up a little to help my mum. Robert opened his wallet and saw the bills inside. He had $500, maybe $600. To him, it was what he'd spend on a lunch. For this boy, It was probably more than he saw in a month. He took out all the bills and held out his hand. "Take it. You deserve it." The boy looked at the money, his eyes wide. "Mister, that's too much. I can't." "Yes, you can," Robert insisted, pushing the bills toward the boy. "You saved my day. Maybe more than that. Take it." The boy hesitated, but finally took the money carefully, as if holding something sacred. He stuffed the bills into the pocket of his shorts and looked at Robert with a gratitude that was heartbreaking. "Thank you so much, mister. Really. This is going to help a lot." Robert stood there watching the boy start to walk away, but something inside him wouldn't let him. Something he couldn't explain, something that had perhaps been dormant for years and years of meetings, deals, and power. He took a step forward. "Wait, where do you live?" The boy stopped and turned. "Nearby, mister, in a neighborhood on the other side of town." "Why?" Robert didn't quite know why he was asking, but he knew he had to know. "I want to meet your mother. I want to see where you live." The boy frowned, suspicious for the first time. "Why, mister? Are you from social services?" "No." Robert shook his head. "I'm not from anywhere. I just want to meet her. That's all." The boy thought for a moment, his eyes studying Robert as if trying to decide if he could be trusted. Finally, he shrugged. "Okay, but it's not a place, mister. It's real simple." "That's fine." And that's how Robert Miller, millionaire businessman, owner of one of the largest logistics companies in Texas, got into his luxury car and started following a 9-year-old boy down the dirt and potholed roads that led to the poorest neighborhood in the city. The drive was longer than Robert expected. They left the highway, passed through some paved streets, then cobblestone streets, and finally entered an area where the asphalt simply disappeared. It was all dirt, dust, potholes, and makeshift houses. The Mercedes swayed with every pothole, and Robert felt the suspension complaining about a terrain it wasn't built for. Children ran barefoot in the streets. Women washed clothes in tubs outside their homes. Men sat in plastic chairs, watching time go by. The boy walked ahead, guiding the way without hurrying. He greeted a few neighbors, dodged chickens scratching freely, and jumped over puddles of dirty water that formed in the holes. Robert followed slowly, observing everything with a mixture of shock and fascination. He knew places like this existed. Of course he knew. But knowing and seeing are different things. Knowing and being there, smelling the smells, hearing the sounds, seeing the lives that unfolded there, was a completely different experience. Finally, the boy stopped in front of a shack. It wasn't a house. It was a jumble of old wood, reinforced cardboard, and a stretched blue tarp that served as a roof. The walls were crooked, nails stuck out at the corners, and the door was a thin plank hanging from rusty hinges. There were no real windows, just holes covered with thick plastic that let in a dull, sad light. "This is it, mister," the boy said, his voice lower now, almost ashamed. Robert got out of the car and stood there looking. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to feel. Part of him wanted to get back in the car, drive away, and forget this place existed. But another part, the same part that made him follow the boy here, made him take a step forward. The door opened before they could knock, and a woman appeared. She must have been in her early 30s, but she looked older. Her face was thin, marked by wrinkles that came more from exhaustion than age. Her dark hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a worn-out dress that must have been colorful once, but was now just a faded, indistinct shade. Her hands were calloused, full of small cuts and scars. They were hands that worked too much. "Lucas, you're late today," the woman said, her voice tired but full of affection. "I was getting worried." She stopped when she saw Robert. "And who's this?" "Mom, this man's car broke down on the highway. I fixed it, and he paid me." Lucas pulled the money from his pocket and showed it to her. "Look how much he gave me." The woman looked at the money, then at Robert, then back at her son. Her eyes grew moist for a second, but she blinked quickly and held back the tears. "Lucas, that's a lot of money." "I know, Mom, but he wanted to give it, said I deserved it." The woman looked at Robert again, this time with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. "You're very generous, sir." But you didn't have to give so much." "Yes, I did," Robert replied, his voice firm. "Your son saved my day. And more than that. He showed me something I had forgotten." The woman didn't answer. She just held her son by the shoulders, as if wanting to protect him from something she couldn't yet identify. "May I come in?" Robert asked. "I just want to talk for a bit. I promise I won't take up much of your time." The woman hesitated. Robert saw the struggle within her, the natural distrust of someone who had learned that the world wasn't generous without a reason. But he also saw the weariness, the exhaustion of someone who carried the world on her back every day and no longer had the strength to doubt a small kindness. "You can come in, but it's nothing much, you see." Robert entered the shack and felt his heart clench. The space was tiny, a single room that served as a bedroom, living room, and kitchen all at once. There was an old mattress in the corner, covered with patched sheets, a small plastic table with 2 broken chairs, a single burner hot plate resting on some bricks. A few old pans hung from nails on the wall. Clothes were strung on a makeshift clothesline that crossed the ceiling. It was all they had, and it was almost nothing. Robert sat in one of the chairs when the woman offered. Lucas stood beside his mother, still holding the can of coins as if it were a treasure. "My name is Robert Miller." "Marlene," the woman replied, "and this is my son, Lucas. A pleasure to meet you." Robert looked around, trying not to let the shock show on his face. "How long have you lived here?" "About 3 years. After my husband passed, I couldn't afford rent anymore, so we came here. It's not much, but it's what we have." Lucas told me his father was a mechanic. He was. Marlene looked at her son with a deep sadness. "One of the best. He taught Lucas everything, said he had a gift, and he does. This boy can fix anything." "I saw," Robert smiled. "That's why I'm here. I want to make you a proposal." Marlene tensed. "What kind of proposal?" Robert took a deep breath. He hadn't really thought through what he was going to say. He hadn't planned any of this. But there, sitting in that shack, looking at that tired woman and that brilliant boy, he knew exactly what he needed to do. "I want to help you, to help. Truly. I want to give Lucas a chance to get a real education. There's a technical high school in the area, one of the best in the state. They have a course in mechanics and automotive engineering. I can get him a full scholarship." Marlene was frozen. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because your son has a talent that can't be wasted. Because he deserves a chance the world won't give him on its own. And because—" Robert paused, searching for the right words. "Because I've spent my whole life accumulating things, power, money, success, but today on that highway I realized that none of it mattered. I was alone, powerless, lost. And it was your son, 9 years old with a can of coins, who saved me. Now I want to pay it back." Tears finally streamed down Marlene's face. She didn't try to hide them. "Mr. Miller, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, you just have to let me help. And it's not just for Lucas. I can also arrange a decent job for you, at my company. Something that pays better, a full-time job with benefits. I want to give you a chance to start over." Marlene covered her face with her hands and began to cry for real. Lucas hugged his mother, tears in his eyes as well. Robert sat there, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. It was gratitude. It was purpose. It was the feeling that for the first time in a long time he was doing something that truly mattered. When Marlene finally calmed down, she looked at Robert with an intensity he had never seen before. "Are you sure about this? Because if it's just out of pity, if it's just to make yourself feel good, I thank you, but I won't accept. My son is not a charity project." "It's not charity," Robert replied firmly. "It's justice. It's giving him what he deserves." Marlene looked at her son, who looked back with those bright eyes full of hope. She squeezed the boy's hand and took a deep breath. "Then we accept, but on one condition." "Which is?" "We don't want handouts. We want opportunities. If you're going to give this to my son, he's going to have to work, study, and strive. And I'll do the same. We won't be a burden to anyone." Robert smiled. It was exactly the kind of response he had hoped to hear. Deal. And so it began. There, in that makeshift shack, On one of the hottest afternoons of the year, 3 lives intersected in a way none of them could have predicted. Robert didn't know it yet, but that meeting would change everything. Not just for Lucas and Marlene, but for himself. Because sometimes, in the middle of the desert, when all seems lost, it's a boy with a can of coins who teaches us the true value of life. Lucas held his mother's hand and smiled. "Mom, we're going to make it. I promise I'll study really hard." "I know, my son." Marlene kissed his forehead. "I always knew you'd go far. I just didn't know it would be so soon." Robert stood up, extending his hand to Marlene. "You have my number now. Tomorrow I'll start organizing everything. The school, the job, everything. You can count on me." Marlene shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Miller. From the bottom of my heart. You don't know what this means to us." "I think I do." Robert looked at Lucas. "And I'm sure you're going to surprise me, kid." Lucas smiled, that wide, genuine smile of someone who still believes the world can be good. "I will, mister. You'll see. I'm going to make my dad proud up there." Robert left the shack with a heart that was heavy and light at the same time. Heavy for what he had seen, for the injustice he had witnessed up close. Light with the certainty that he was doing the right thing. He got into his Mercedes, started the engine that now ran perfectly, thanks to the small hands of a 9-year-old boy, and left that key, taking with him something he hadn't expected to find that day. Hope, purpose, and the feeling that for the first time in a long time, his life had a meaning that went beyond the numbers in a bank account. As he drove back to the city, the sun began to set on the horizon, painting the sky orange and pink, and Robert Miller smiled, alone in the car, knowing that tomorrow would be the beginning of a new story. For him, for Marlene, and especially for Lucas, the boy who fixed cars and who, without knowing it, had fixed something inside the soul of a man who thought he had everything, but in the end had nothing that truly mattered. The following weeks were a whirlwind of changes that no one in that family was prepared for. Robert kept his word with a speed that impressed even himself. In less than a week, Marlene had signed the papers to work in the administrative department of his company, with a decent salary, a full-time contract, and all the benefits she had never imagined having. Lucas, in turn, was enrolled at the Armand Silva Technical High School, a respected institution, on the south side of Austin, that produced some of the best technicians and engineers in the region. On Marlene's first day of work, Robert made sure to be there. He waited for her at the entrance of the company, a 15-story mirrored building that reflected the grey Austin morning sky. Marlene arrived by bus, wearing a simple but clean outfit she had bought with the money Lucas earned from the repair. She looked at the building with a mixture of fear and awe, as if standing before something too big for her. "Good morning, Marlene." Robert greeted her with a genuine smile. "Ready for your first day?" Marlene swallowed hard and nodded. "I think so, Mr. Miller, but I won't lie, I'm nervous." "That's normal." Robert placed a hand on her shoulder in a fatherly way. "But relax. You'll see the people here are good folks, and if anyone treats you badly, I want you to tell me, okay?" "Okay." They entered together, and Robert introduced her to the team. Marlene would be an administrative assistant, working with document organization, scheduling, and general support. It was nothing complicated, and Robert made sure she would have all the necessary training. But he noticed the glances. People didn't say anything directly, but there were those exchanged looks, those discreet whispers. He knew what they were thinking. Another one of the boss's pet projects. Another one who got in through the back door. Robert didn't care. He knew Marlene would prove her worth, and even if she didn't, he wouldn't mind. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about giving a fair chance to someone who never had one. Lucas, on the other hand, had a rougher awakening. The Armand Silva Technical High School was a world completely different from anything he knew. The building was huge, with equipped laboratories, workshops with state-of-the-art tools, classrooms with digital whiteboards, and a massive courtyard where students gathered during breaks. Lucas walked in on the first day holding the new backpack Robert had bought for him, wearing the uniform that still smelled new, and feeling his stomach churn with nervousness. The first thing he noticed was that he was different. All the other students seemed at ease, talking in groups, laughing, talking about vacations in places Lucas had never heard of. They wore brand-name sneakers, expensive watches, and carried the latest smartphones. And then there was him, the boy from the shack, the boy with the can of coins, the boy who had just emerged from dust and misery to enter this bright, intimidating world. In the first class, the teacher asked everyone to introduce themselves. One by one, the students said their names, where they were from, what their parents did. Son of a doctor, daughter of a lawyer, son of a businessman. When it was Lucas's turn, he felt all eyes turn to him. My name is Lucas. I used to live in a poor neighborhood. My dad was a mechanic, but he's gone now. Now it's just me and my mom. The silence that followed was heavy. Some students exchanged glances. A girl in the back of the room gave a muffled giggle. The teacher, a middle-aged woman named Ms. Evans, looked at Lucas with an expression he couldn't decipher. It could have been pity. It could have been contempt. Or maybe it was just indifference. Welcome, Lucas, the teacher said, her voice neutral. I hope you'll work very hard to keep up with the rest of the class. And so it began. From the very first day, Lucas felt he was being judged, not for being dumb or incompetent, but for being poor, for coming from a place no one there knew, for not talking the same way, for not having the same references, for not belonging to that world. During the first day's lunch break, Lucas sat alone at a table in the cafeteria. He opened the lunchbox his mother had prepared, simple rice with beans and a piece of chicken, and began to eat in silence. Around him, the other students chatted animatedly, forming groups, laughing, sharing expensive snacks they bought from the canteen. No one approached him. No one asked his name. He was invisible. This repeated in the following days. Lucas went to school, attended classes, struggled to understand every concept, every formula, every procedure. And then, at break, he sat alone. When it was time for group projects, no one chose him. He was always the last one left, added to some group by the teacher, where he was treated like a dead weight. But Lucas didn't give up. Every night when he got home, he told his mother everything. Marlene listened attentively, holding her son's hand, reminding him of where they came from and why. They were there. My son, I know it's hard, but you have to be strong. You're just as smart as any of those kids, smarter even. You learned to fix a car at 9 years old. You have a gift. Don't let anyone make you believe you don't deserve to be there. Lucas would lower his head and hold back tears. I know, Mom, but it's hard. They don't even want to talk to me. Then show them who you are. Show them with your actions. Show them you don't need their approval. And that's exactly what Lucas did. In the first practical mechanics class, the students were taken to the school's workshop, a huge space filled with dismantled cars, tools organized on panels, and state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment. The teacher, a burly man named Mr. Davis, explained that they would work in pairs to identify a problem in an engine he had deliberately sabotaged. The pairs were formed, and again Lucas was left over. The teacher sighed and put him on his own, saying he could try to do the exercise individually. Lucas didn't complain. He approached the engine, a model he had never seen up close but recognized from the diagrams he had studied in the books Robert had given him. The other students began to work in pairs, talking among themselves, trying to figure out the problem. Lucas, alone, stood still for a few seconds, just observing. He looked at the cables, the connections, the valves, and then he saw it. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A loose connection in the ignition system, combined with a slightly clogged air filter. He said nothing. He just grabbed the tools, reconnected the cable, cleaned the filter and tested the system. The engine started on the first try, purring smoothly and powerfully. Lucas turned it off and stepped back, wiping his hands on his clothes. Mr. Davis was on the other side of the workshop, helping a pair that was stuck. When he heard Lucas's engine run, he turned his head, surprised. The other students also stopped to look. Lucas was there alone with the engine running perfectly, while everyone else was still trying to figure out what was wrong. Mr. Davis approached, incredulous. You're finished already? Yes, sir, Lucas replied, his voice calm. It was the ignition cable and the air filter. The teacher looked at the engine, tested it himself, and confirmed that everything was correct. He looked at Lucas with a new expression, a mixture of respect and surprise. "How did you do that so fast?" "I just looked and saw what was wrong. My dad taught me to see the signs." The silence in the workshop was deafening. All the students were looking at Lucas now, not with contempt or indifference, but with something different. Maybe it was respect, maybe it was envy, or maybe it was just the realization that this boy they had ignored was, in fact, far more capable than any of them. Mr. Davis clapped Lucas on the shoulder. "Very good, kid, very good indeed." From that day on, things began to change. Slowly, but they changed. Some students started greeting Lucas in the hallways. Others asked for his help in practical classes. He still didn't have real friends, was still treated as different, but at least now he was respected. He had proven his worth in the only way that mattered in that place, with knowledge and skill. But not everything was easy. Ms. Evans, who taught the theoretical automotive engineering classes, still seemed to have something against Lucas. She never praised him, even when he got all the questions right on tests. She always found something to criticize, some misplaced comma, some explanation that could have been more complete. It was as if she were determined to prove that Lucas didn't deserve to be there. In one of her classes, she was explaining electronic fuel injection systems when she made a mistake. She said the fuel pump was controlled directly by the accelerator, which wasn't true. Lucas noticed the error immediately. He hesitated, not sure if he should speak up. But then he remembered his mother's words. "Show them who you are." He raised his hand. "Excuse me, Miss Evans, but I think there's a mistake there." Miss Evans stopped writing and turned, her eyes cold. "What do you mean, Lucas?" "The fuel pump isn't controlled directly by the accelerator. It's controlled by the car's electronic control unit, which regulates the pressure based on various sensors. The accelerator only gives the command to the ECU, but it doesn't control the pump directly." The silence in the room was absolute. All the students looked from Lucas to the teacher, waiting for her reaction. Miss Evans's face turned red. It was clear she knew she was wrong but didn't want to admit it. "Lucas, are you questioning my knowledge?" "No, ma'am, I'm just pointing out a mistake. It happens to everyone." The teacher pressed her lips together. "I know what I'm teaching. Perhaps you should pay more attention instead of trying to correct me." "But Miss Evans, Lucas is right," a student in the back of the room said, showing his phone. "I just looked it up. The pump is controlled by the ECU, not the accelerator." Miss Evans turned even redder. She looked at the class, at Lucas, and then sighed. "Very well. Perhaps I was confused. Let's continue." It was a small but important victory. Lucas hadn't done it to humiliate the teacher, but to defend the knowledge he had, the knowledge his father had instilled in him. And the other students noticed. Some even started talking to him after class, asking where he had learned so much. Meanwhile, Robert was following everything closely. He called Marlene every week, asking about Lucas, about how he was doing in school. Marlene always reported with pride, but also with concern. She saw her son pushing himself beyond his limits, studying late, trying to prove he deserved to be there. One day, Robert decided to make a surprise visit to the school. He wanted to see with his own eyes how Lucas was doing. He spoke with the principal, who received him enthusiastically and asked to sit in on some classes. The principal agreed, proud to show the school to such an important businessman. Robert watched a practical class where Lucas was assembling a brake system. He saw the concentration on the boy's face, the precision in his movements, the confidence in every step. And then he saw something else. He saw the other students looking at Lucas, some with respect, others with envy. But he also saw Miss Evans, who walked past Lucas without saying a word, without praise, without acknowledging the flawless work he was doing. After the class, Robert asked to speak with the teacher privately. They sat in an empty room and Robert got straight to the point. "Miss Evans, I noticed you didn't give Lucas any feedback during the class. Why is that?" Miss Evans crossed her arms, defensive. "I give feedback when necessary. Lucas is a good student, but I don't need to praise him constantly." "But you praised 3 other students, and Lucas's work was clearly the best in the class." Ms. Evans sighed. "Mr. Miller, I'll be honest. I know you helped this boy get in here, and that's a nice thing, it really is. but I can't treat him differently from the others. I can't turn a blind eye to his mistakes just because he comes from a poor family." "I'm not asking you to do that," Robert said, his voice firm but controlled. "I'm asking you to treat him with the same fairness you treat the others, and from what I saw today, you're doing the opposite. You're being harder on him than you need to be." Ms. Evans opened her mouth to respond, but Robert held up a hand. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want Lucas to have the same chance as any other student. Nothing more, nothing less." He left the room before she could reply. Robert was used to dealing with difficult people, but this bothered him more than he expected. It wasn't about him. It was about Lucas. It was about a 9-year-old boy fighting against a world that insisted on not believing in him. That evening, Robert had dinner with Marlene and Lucas at a simple restaurant near the new house he had helped them rent. It was nothing luxurious, but it was a decent, clean place, with separate bedrooms and a working bathroom. For Marlene and Lucas, it was a palace. "How was school today?" Robert asked, cutting his steak. "It was good," Lucas replied, but Robert noticed the hesitation in his voice. "I'm learning a lot." "And Ms. Evans? How has she been treating you?" Lucas looked down. "She's demanding, but it's okay, I can handle it." Robert looked at Marlene, who also seemed worried. "Lucas, you don't have to take nonsense from anyone. If someone is treating you badly, you tell me." "It's not nonsense, Mr. Miller," Lucas insisted. "It's just that she doesn't really believe in me, but I'm going to prove her wrong." Robert smiled. That was exactly what he had hoped to hear. This boy had strength. He had determination. He had something no amount of money in the world could buy. He had character. After dinner, Robert said goodbye and drove back home. But first he made a call to the school principal. And he made it very clear that he expected Lucas to be treated with respect. Not with privileges, but with respect. The principal promised he would speak with all the teachers. The months passed, and Lucas continued to grow, not just in knowledge, but in confidence. He began to participate more in classes, to ask questions, to share what he knew, and slowly he carved out his own space. He was no longer the invisible boy. He was the boy who knew more about engines than half the class. He was the boy who fixed a Mercedes on the highway at 9 years old. Marlene was also flourishing. The job at Robert's company was challenging, but she was doing well. She learned quickly, was dedicated, and was soon being praised by her colleagues. Robert promoted her twice in 6 months, recognizing her value. And Marlene, for the first time in years, felt she had a future, that she wasn't just surviving, but living. One evening, Robert received a call from Lucas. The boy's voice was excited, almost shouting with joy. "Mr. Miller, you have to come to the school tomorrow. There's something I want to show you." "What is it, Lucas?" "It's a surprise, but you're going to like it, I promise." Robert smiled. "All right, kid, I'll be there." The next day, Robert arrived at the school and was greeted by a beaming Lucas. They went to the workshop, where an old disassembled engine sat on a workbench. Lucas approached and began to explain. "Mr. Miller, I've been working on a project. It's a device that helps diagnose problems in engines. You connect it here to the system, and it does a full reading. It shows where the error is, what needs to be fixed, everything. And the best part is, it's cheap to make. It could help poor mechanics who don't have money to buy the expensive equipment." Robert was speechless. He looked at the prototype, crude and makeshift, but functional. He looked at Lucas, now only 10 years old, explaining concepts of electronics and programming with impressive ease, and he felt his chest swell with pride. "Lucas, this is incredible. Did you do this all by yourself?" "I had help from Mr. Jenkins, the janitor. He was a mechanic before he worked here. We work at night after everyone else goes home. He teaches me some things, I teach him others." Robert knelt in front of Lucas and placed his hands on the boy's shoulders. "Lucas, you're special. You know that, right?" Lucas shrugged shyly. "I just like fixing things." "No, kid. You don't just like fixing things. You have a gift that can change lives, and I'm going to help you make that happen." Lucas smiled, and Robert saw something in his eyes that made him realize this boy was going to go far, very far. And he, Robert Miller, the millionaire businessman who once found himself lost on an empty road, had the honor of being by his side on this journey. That night, Robert drove home thinking about everything that had happened. He thought about how a simple encounter on a highway had changed everything, how a boy with a can of coins had saved not just his car, but his soul, and how now, months later, that same boy was creating something that could help thousands of people. Robert knew there were still many challenges ahead. He knew Lucas would face more prejudice, more disbelief, more people who didn't believe in him. But he also knew that Lucas was strong, he was resilient, and he had something few people had. He had a purpose, and with purpose anything is possible. The next 2 years were a period of intense growth for Lucas. He was 12 now, and the thin, shy boy who had entered the technical school had transformed into a confident teenager, respected by his peers and admired by his teachers, all except Miss Evans, who continued her silent resistance, though she was more careful now after the principal had spoken with her. The prototype Lucas had shown Robert 2 years ago had evolved drastically. With the help of Mr. Jenkins, the janitor who had become his secret mentor, and with the resources Robert discreetly provided, Lucas now had a functional, compact, and surprisingly efficient device. He called it the People's Diagnostic, a simple name that perfectly reflected his intention. It was an automotive diagnostic tool that would cost less than 1/10 of the price of imported models, making it accessible to small garages and independent mechanics. Robert was so impressed with the project that he decided to do something bold. He entered Lucas into the National Youth Tech and Innovation Fair, a prestigious event that brought together the best students from across the country. The competition was fierce, with hundreds of projects submitted, but Robert believed Lucas had a real chance to stand out. When Lucas found out, he was torn between excitement and fear. The fair would be in Washington, D.C. in 6 months. He would have to present his project to a panel of expert judges, investors, and representatives from major companies. It was a unique opportunity, but also a terrifying one. "Mr. Miller, I don't know if I'm ready for this," Lucas confessed in one of his weekly conversations with his godfather. He had started calling Robert that after the businessman moved, had formally asked to be the boy's godfather. Lucas's mother had accepted with tears in her eyes, and since then, Robert was officially part of the family. "Yes, you are ready," Robert replied firmly. "Lucas, you've created something incredible, something that can change the lives of thousands of mechanics across the country. You can't be afraid to show it to the world." "But what if I mess up? What if the device doesn't work on the spot? What if the judges don't believe me?" Robert placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "If you mess up, you learn and try again. If the device fails, you fix it, and if they don't believe you, you prove them wrong. That's how it works, Lucas. Life isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway." Lucas looked at Robert and saw in those eyes the same determination that had made him stop on the highway 3 years ago. He nodded, took a deep breath, and made a decision. He was going to compete, and he was going to give it his all. But it wouldn't be easy. The news that Lucas was developing an innovative project spread through the school, and with it came attention. Good attention, but also bad. It was around this time that Tyler Morgan appeared. Tyler was the son of Augustus Morgan, one of the directors at Robert's company. He was a 13-year-old boy, tall, athletic, with perfectly styled hair and designer clothes. He was smart, there was no doubt about that, but he was also arrogant. He was used to being the best in his class, the most popular, the one everyone wanted to be like, until Lucas showed up. At first, Tyler simply ignored Lucas. He was in a different, more advanced grade and had no reason to interact with a boy 2 years younger. But when he heard that Lucas would be representing the school at the national fair, something ignited within him. It was impossible. He, Tyler Morgan, a director's son, an exemplary student, had been passed over for a poor kid who got into the school through charity. Tyler started asking questions. He found out Robert was Lucas's godfather. He found out Robert was funding the project. And then he started spreading rumors that Lucas was only there because of favoritism, that the project wasn't really his but the work of engineers hired by Robert, that it was all a stunt to improve the company's image. The rumors reached Lucas one afternoon while he was working in the lab. A classmate, feeling sorry for him, told him what Tyler was saying. Lucas was frozen, not with fear but with anger, an anger he didn't know he had inside him. He had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, for someone to come and question his effort. Lucas found Tyler in the schoolyard. The older boy was surrounded by friends, laughing at some inside joke. Lucas approached, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "Tyler, I heard what you've been saying about me." Tyler turned, surprised. Then he smirked. "Oh, yeah? And what am I saying?" "That my project isn't mine. That I'm only here because Robert helps me. That it's all a lie." Tyler shrugged. "I'm just stating the obvious. Everyone knows you'd be nothing without his money." Lucas took a step forward. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've been through to get here. You were born with everything. You never had to fight for anything. So don't talk like you know what I'm capable of." The courtyard fell silent. Everyone was watching now. Tyler turned red. He wasn't used to being challenged. He moved closer to Lucas, using his height to intimidate him. "You want to prove something? Then let's see if your little project actually works at the fair, because I doubt it will." Lucas didn't back down. He looked into Tyler's eyes without blinking. "I will prove it. And when I do, you're going to have to eat your words." Tyler laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. He turned and walked away, followed by his friends. But Lucas knew this wasn't over. He had just made an enemy, and a powerful one. That night, Lucas told his mother and Robert everything. Marlene was worried, but Robert was thoughtful. He knew Augustus Morgan, Tyler's father. He was an ambitious, calculating man who had always had reservations about Robert's emotional involvement in what he called charity cases. Robert knew Augustus was pressuring the company board to have him step back from these initiatives and focus solely on business. "Lucas, I need to tell you something," Robert said seriously. "You're going to face a lot of people like Tyler, people who don't believe in you, people who think you don't deserve to be where you are. And the only way to shut them up is to make your work flawless, so good that no one can question it." "I know," Lucas replied. "That's why I'm going to work even harder." And that's exactly what he did. In the following months, Lucas practically lived in the lab. He tested the device repeatedly, made adjustments, improved the code, and refined every detail. Mr. Jenkins helped him whenever he could, offering the experience of decades as a mechanic, and Robert provided the necessary resources, but without interfering in the creative process. He knew this had to be genuinely Lucas's. But the pressure was mounting. At Robert's company, Augustus Morgan began to publicly question the spending on social projects. He argued that the company was losing focus, diverting resources from profitable areas to initiatives that brought no financial return. In a tense board meeting, he confronted Robert directly. "Robert, with all due respect, we are a business, not a charity. You've been investing time and money in individual cases like this boy from the technical school. This is not sustainable." Robert looked at Augustus with a calm that hid his irritation. "Augustus, that boy has created something that could revolutionize the automotive diagnostic market. It's not charity, it's an investment in talent." "Talent you're funding because you want to feel good about yourself," Augustus retorted. "And in the meantime, our competitors are moving ahead. We need focus, Robert. Focus on profit, not on sentimental projects." The room fell silent. Robert felt all eyes on him. He knew Augustus was gaining support among some board members. He knew his position was being questioned, but he wasn't going to back down. "I founded this company with sweat and hard work, and I've always believed that a company has a social responsibility. If you think helping talented young people is a waste of time, then maybe you're in the wrong company." It was a tense moment, but Robert held his ground. The meeting ended without any definitive resolutions, but he knew the political war had begun. Augustus wouldn't give up easily. Meanwhile, Lucas was facing his own challenges. A month before the fair, during a practical class, he left his prototype in the lab during a break. When he returned, he noticed something was wrong. The device turned on, but it didn't work correctly. The data was corrupted. The code had errors that weren't there before. Lucas felt panic rising. He checked everything, trying to understand what had happened. and then he realized. Someone had tampered with the code. Someone had deliberately altered the main parameters, subtly but devastatingly sabotaging the system. He looked around the lab. A few students were working on their own projects, and in the back, Tyler was sitting with a group talking quietly. When their eyes met, Tyler smiled. A small, almost imperceptible smile, but it said everything. Lucas felt the anger return stronger this time. He wanted to confront Tyler, to scream, to demand justice, but then he remembered Robert's words. The only way to shut them up is to make your work flawless. He said nothing. He just went back to his bench, opened the code, and started working. He spent hours reviewing it line by line, identifying every malicious change, correcting every error. It was exhausting, meticulous, frustrating work. But Lucas didn't give up. And when he finished, the device worked better than before. That night he told Robert what had happened. The businessman was furious. He wanted to go to the school, confront Tyler, speak with the principal. But Lucas stopped him. No, Godfather. If you do that, they'll say I can't solve my own problems, that I need you to fight my battles. I'll prove my worth at the fair. That will be enough. Robert looked at the 12-year-old boy speaking with the maturity of an adult and felt his chest tighten with pride. You're right. I'm sorry. I just wanted to protect you. I know, Lucas smiled, but I don't need protection. I need an opportunity, and you've already given me that. The final weeks before the fair were intense. Lucas barely slept, testing and retesting the device on different types of engines, ensuring everything would work perfectly. Marlene supported him as best she could, preparing food, making sure he got at least a few hours of rest and reminding him that she believed in him. But the pressure was taking its toll. Lucas started having anxiety attacks. He would wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, his heart racing, thinking about everything that could go wrong. One of those nights he had a breakdown. He tore up all the technical drawings he had been developing, screaming that he would never be accepted as one of the greats, that he was just a poor kid trying to pretend to be someone. Marlene heard the screams and ran to his room. She found Lucas on the floor, surrounded by torn papers, crying. She knelt beside him and hugged him tightly. Lucas, listen to me. You are not an imposter. You are a genius. A boy who fixed a Mercedes at 9 years old. A boy who created something that experienced engineers would take months to make. You are special, my son. You, and no matter what happens at the fair, you've already won, because you got here with dignity, hard work, and love. Lucas cried in his mother's arms for a long time, and when the tears dried, he stood up, gathered the torn papers, and started piecing them back together. He wasn't going to give up. He couldn't. He had come too far. Finally, the day came to travel to Washington, D.C. Robert rented a comfortable car and drove them himself. Marlene took time off work and went along. The three of them headed down the highway with Lucas in the back seat, the device protected in a padded box beside him. During the drive, Robert looked in the rearview mirror and saw Lucas, tense, holding the box as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Nervous. Very, Lucas admitted. What if I forget what I'm supposed to say? What if the judges ask me questions I can't answer? Marlene turned in the front seat. My son, you know everything about this project, more than anyone in the world. And if you don't know an answer, you admit it honestly. There's no shame in saying you don't. No? The shame is in lying or pretending, Robert agreed. And remember, Lucas, you're not just competing to win a prize. You're competing to show the world that talent exists in unexpected places. You're representing all the poor kids who never got a chance. That's bigger than any trophy. Lucas nodded, feeling the weight of those words. It wasn't just about him. It was about showing that talent has no social class, no address, no privilege. Talent is talent, and it deserves to be recognized wherever it is. When they arrived in Washington, D.C., the monumental city welcomed them with its vast blue sky and imposing architecture. The fair was held at the Convention Center, a massive building where hundreds of projects were being presented simultaneously. Lucas saw students from all over the country setting up their presentations, each bringing innovative ideas in fields ranging from robotics to sustainability. from biotechnology to artificial intelligence. Lucas's booth was modest compared to some others that had flashy digital displays and elaborate setups. He had just a simple table, his device a used engine for demonstrations, and a few explanatory posters he had made himself. But there was something about his booth that drew attention. Maybe it was its honest simplicity. Maybe it was the story behind the project. On the first day of the fair, the judges began to circulate among the booths. Lucas saw them as they approached. There were 3 of them, 2 men and a woman, all formally dressed, carrying clipboards and pens. They had serious professional expressions, evaluating every detail with critical eyes. "Good morning, young man," one of the judges said, looking at Lucas. "Can you present your project to us?" Lucas took a deep breath. This was the moment. Everything he had worked for over the past 3 years was about to be tested. "Good morning. My name is Lucas Smith. I'm 12 years old and I study at the Armand Silver Technical High School in Austin. My project is the People's Diagnostic, an affordable automotive diagnostic tool." He began to explain how it worked, connecting the device to the demonstration engine. He talked about the sensors, the fault identification algorithm, the simple interface that any mechanic could use even without advanced technical training. And then he activated the system. The device turned on, performed a quick scan of the engine, and in less than 10 seconds identified a problem Lucas had deliberately created, a loose cable in the ignition system. The small screen showed exactly where the problem was and how to fix it. The judges looked at each other, impressed. The woman stepped closer. "And how much would it cost to produce each unit of this device?" "With mass production, about $50, Lucas replied. "That's less than 10% of the price of imported equipment. My idea is to sell it at a symbolic price to low-income garages, doing social work at the same time." "And you developed this by yourself?" one of the men asked, skeptical. "I had help from a mentor, an experienced mechanic, and my godfather provided the resources to buy the parts. But the design, the code, the idea, it was all mine," Lucas said firmly, looking the judge straight in the eye. There was a moment of silence. The 3 judges looked at each other, then back at Lucas. They asked a few more technical questions, tested the device again, and examined the diagrams. Then they moved on, making notes on their clipboards. Lucas stood there, trembling slightly, trying to decipher their expressions. Had he done well? Had he failed? He didn't know. He only knew he had given it his all. Marlene and Robert, who had been watching from a distance so as not to interfere, approached as soon as the judges left. "You were incredible, my son," Marlene said, hugging him. "So confident, so smart." "They seemed impressed," Robert added. "I think you have a great chance, Lucas." The rest of the day was a mix of hope and nervousness. Lucas saw other projects, some truly impressive, and began to doubt his chances. There was a 15-year-old girl who had developed a water purification system using solar energy. There was a 16-year-old boy who created a robotic arm controlled by brain impulses. How could he compete with that? But then something happened. People started stopping at his booth. Not just judges, but other visitors, teachers, even some business people circulating at the fair. They asked questions, tested the device, and always had the same reaction of surprise and admiration. And when they found out Lucas was only 12 and came from a humble family, the admiration turned into something more. Respect, recognition, hope. At the end of the second day, a man in an expensive suit approached the booth. He introduced himself as a representative of a major car manufacturer. "I'm impressed with your project, young man. How much do you want for the patent?" Lucas was speechless. "I don't understand, sir." "I'm offering to buy your invention. We can make a good deal. 200,000, maybe 300. What do you say?" Robert, who was nearby, quickly approached. "I'm sorry, but this project is not for sale." The man looked at Robert, recognizing him. "Mr. Miller, I didn't know you were involved in this. I'm Lucas's godfather, and this project is his, not mine. The decision is his." The man turned his attention back to Lucas. "So, what do you say?" Lucas looked at the man, then at Robert, then at his mother. and then he knew exactly what to say. "Thank you for the offer, sir, but I don't want to sell. I want this device to get into the hands of those who really need it. The poor mechanics, the small garages. If I sell the patent, it will just become another expensive product, and that's not what I want." The man frowned. "You're turning down a fortune for idealism?" "No, sir," Lucas replied, firmly. "I'm turning down a fortune because I know where I came from, and I'm not going to forget." The man shook his head in disbelief and walked away. But Lucas didn't regret it, not for a second. That night at the hotel, the three of them had dinner together. Marlene couldn't stop talking about how proud she was. Robert was quieter, thoughtful. At one point, he looked at Lucas and spoke. "Lucas, you know that by refusing that offer, you might have lost a unique opportunity, right?" "I know," Lucas replied. "But some things are more important than money." Robert smiled. "That's the answer I was hoping to hear, and that's why I'm so proud to be your godfather." On the last day of the fair, the time came to announce the winners. All the competitors gathered in the main auditorium. Lucas was sitting between his mother and Robert, his heart beating so hard he thought everyone could hear it. They announced third place. It wasn't Lucas. They announced second place, not him either. And then came the moment for first place. And the winner of the Technology and Innovation category is Lucas Smith from the Armand Silva Technical High School with the project People's Diagnostic. Lucas was frozen. He couldn't believe it. Marlene screamed with joy, hugging her son. Robert had tears in his eyes, smiling, and Lucas, still in shock, stood up and walked to the stage under a wave of applause. He received the trophy, a plaque, and a certificate for a free patent registration. But more important than any prize was what it represented. It was proof that he had made it, that his talent was real, that no one, not Tyler, not the skeptical teachers, not the whole world, could deny his worth. At the microphone, his voice trembling but firm, Lucas spoke. "I want to thank my mom, who always believed in me, my godfather, who gave me the chance I needed, and my dad, who taught me everything I know. This award isn't just for me. It's for everyone who fights every day to prove they are capable. Thank you." The applause was deafening, and in that moment, under the stage lights, holding that trophy, Lucas knew he had kept his promise. He had proven his worth. And this was just the beginning. The return from DC was different from the trip there, where, before there was tension and nervousness, now there was celebration and hope. The trophy sat securely in Lucas's lap, shining in the sunlight streaming through the car windows. Marlene couldn't stop looking at her son with a smile that mixed pride and emotion. Robert drove in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that says more than words ever could. During the trip, Robert's phone didn't stop ringing. There were calls from journalists wanting to interview Lucas, companies interested in partnerships, even the principal of the technical school congratulating the boy. The news that a 12-year-old had won. The national fair was spreading rapidly through social media and the specialized press, but not all the calls were positive. Augustus Morgan, the company director and Tyler's father, called Robert personally. The conversation was tense. Augustus started with formal congratulations, but soon revealed his true intentions. He wanted Robert to use his influence over Lucas to get the boy to sell the patent to a partner company, arguing it would be the best deal for everyone involved. "Augustus, for the last time, the project is Lucas's. I will not pressure the boy to do anything he doesn't want to," Robert replied, his voice firm but restrained. "And if you continue to try to use your position in the company to force me into this, we're going to have a serious problem. Robert, you need to understand that the board is questioning your priorities. We are losing lucrative opportunities because of these sentimental initiatives of yours. I need you to think like a businessman, not a philanthropist." "I think like a human being, Augustus, something you seem to have forgotten how to do." The call ended there, but Robert knew the political war at the company was far from over. When they arrived back in Austin, the reception was surprising. The technical school had organized a small welcome ceremony. Students, teachers, and even some parents were gathered in the courtyard, applauding as Lucas entered with the trophy. It was strange and emotional at the same time. The boy who months ago sat alone in the cafeteria was now being welcomed as a hero. The principal gave a speech praising Lucas and the school, obviously taking the opportunity to promote the institution. But Lucas didn't mind. He looked around, seeing familiar faces, some genuinely happy for him, others just curious, a few still skeptical. And then his gaze met Tyler's, who was at the back of the courtyard, arms crossed with an unreadable expression on his face. After the ceremony, when everyone had dispersed, Tyler approached Lucas. The two stood face to face for a few seconds, neither knowing quite what to say. "Congratulations," Tyler finally said, his voice low. "You deserved it." Lucas blinked, surprised. "Thanks." Tyler glanced around, as if checking if anyone was listening. "Look, I was a jerk. I said things I shouldn't have. And that thing in the lab, me messing with your code, it was wrong. I just wanted to prove I was better, you know. But you proved you're the best." Lucas hadn't expected that. Part of him wanted to stay angry, to throw everything Tyler had done in his face. But another part, the part his mother and godfather had helped him develop, knew that holding a grudge led nowhere. "You were a jerk," Lucas said, but without anger. "But it's okay. I get it. Sometimes we do stupid things when we feel threatened." Tyler gave a wry smile. "Yeah, I guess that was it." The two didn't become friends that day. Maybe they never would. But there was an understanding, a mutual respect that hadn't existed before, and sometimes that was enough. In the following weeks, Lucas's life changed in ways he never imagined. He was interviewed by various media outlets, telling his story, showcasing his device, and inspiring other young people across the country. His story especially touched low-income families, who saw in Lucas proof that it was possible to overcome the barriers of social inequality. But with fame also came predators. Large companies began to harass Lucas with increasingly generous offers for the patent. Some offered absurd amounts, $500,000, $1 million, even more. Others tried intimidation tactics, sending lawyers with veiled threats of lawsuits for alleged infringement of existing patents, trying to force him to give up the rights to his creation. Robert hired the best lawyers to protect Lucas, but it was the boy himself who made the most important decision. He would not sell the patent. Instead, with the prize money he had won at the fair, and with financial support from Robert, he officially registered the patent and created an accessible distribution plan. The People's Diagnostic would be sold for a symbolic price of $100, barely covering production costs, and would be distributed primarily to garages in underserved communities. The decision caused a stir in the market. Financial analysts called Lucas naive. Businessmen said he was wasting a fortune. But mechanics from all over the country began to order the device. Within a few months, hundreds of small garages had access to a technology that was once a privilege of large chains. And every garage that received the device sent messages of thanks, photos, and stories of how it was changing their business. Lucas read each message with tears in his eyes. This was bigger than he had imagined. It wasn't about money. It was about real impact on the lives of real people. It was about making a difference. Meanwhile, Robert was fighting his own battles. Augustus Morgan and other board members intensified the pressure for him to change his priorities. In a particularly tense meeting, Augustus presented an ultimatum. "Robert, we need a decision. Either you step away from these personal projects and refocus exclusively on the company, or the board will have to reconsider your position as CEO." The room fell silent. Robert looked around, seeing the faces of the men and women he had worked with for years. Some seemed uncomfortable with the ultimatum, others clearly supported Augustus. Robert took a deep breath, and then did something even he didn't expect. "You know what I've learned these past few years? That I spent decades accumulating money and power, but feeling empty. Until the day my car broke down on a highway and a 9-year-old boy, barefoot and covered in dust, taught me more about life than all the MBAs and business meetings I've ever had. He reminded me that success isn't about how much you have, but about how much you give. And if you don't understand that, then you really are in the wrong company." Robert stood up. "If you want my resignation, "You can have it, but I will not change who I've become. I will not abandon Lucas or Marlene or the social projects that have made my life truly meaningful." There was a moment of shock. No one expected Robert to simply stand up and leave. But that's exactly what he did. He walked to the door, opened it, and left, leaving behind a room full of stunned people. In the following days, the news spread. Robert Miller had left the company he founded over philosophical differences with the board. The media speculated about the reasons, and soon the full story came to light. The story of how he met Lucas, how he decided to help, and how it changed his life. The public reaction was massive. Consumers began to boycott the company, accusing the board of valuing profit over humanity. Employees protested internally, many resigning in solidarity with Robert. Investors began to question the decision, worried about the impact on the brand's image. In less than 2 weeks, the board reversed its decision. They offered Robert a triumphant return, with full control over strategic decisions and the freedom to conduct any social projects he wished. Augustus Morgan was subtly pushed out, receiving a generous severance package to leave without making a fuss. Robert agreed to return, but with conditions. He would create an entire department dedicated to corporate social responsibility, with a guaranteed budget and complete autonomy. A portion of the company's profits would be allocated to educational projects for underprivileged youth, and the first major project would be a partnership with Lucas to expand the distribution of the People's Diagnostic. While all this was happening, Marlene and Lucas were living their own transformation. With the money Marlene had been saving from her job, and with Robert's help, they were finally able to leave their rental and buy their own house. It wasn't a mansion, but it was a real home. 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room, a full kitchen, a large bathroom, and even a small backyard. For someone who came from a shack of wood and tarp, it was a palace. Lucas chose the smallest room for himself and turned another into a private workshop. There he could work on new projects, test ideas, and create. Robert helped equip the space with professional tools, but always made it clear that this was Lucas's space, not a gift with strings attached. On moving day, Marlene stood at the door of the new house, looking inside, unable to believe it. She remembered how many nights she had cried alone in the shack, wondering how she would ever provide a decent life for her son. She remembered the fear, the exhaustion, the feeling of being alone against the world. And now, here she was, a homeowner, with a stable job, watching her son shine. Robert arrived carrying some boxes and found Marlene with tears in her eyes. "Is everything okay?" Marlene wiped her face and smiled. "Everything is more than okay, Robert. I was just remembering how it all started, how I had lost all hope, and how you showed up and changed everything." Robert shook his head. "It wasn't me, it was Lucas. That 9-year-old boy who fixed my car saved more than an engine that day. He saved my soul." The two hugged, a hug of mutual gratitude, of recognition that this was a story that had changed all of them. But Lucas didn't stop there. Now 14, more mature and confident, he had an idea that surprised even Robert. He wanted to create a social project that would offer scholarships in mechanics to underprivileged children. It would be called Asphalt Talents, in honor of the place where he met Robert. The idea was to identify young people with potential in poor communities, offer them complete technical training, tools, mentorship, and even a small stipend so they could dedicate themselves to their studies. The goal was to replicate the chance Lucas had, but on a larger scale. Robert loved the idea and committed to funding the project for the first 2 years. They approached the technical school, which agreed to participate by offering spots and facilities. Marlene, who had been promoted to administrative coordinator at Robert's company, offered to manage the project's bureaucracy. The first beneficiary was chosen by Lucas personally. It was an 8-year-old boy named Petey, whom he found asking for change at a traffic light, holding a dented can. The similarity to his own story made Lucas smile. It was as if the circle was closing. Robert accompanied Lucas on the visit to Petey's family. The house was similar to Lucas's old shack, perhaps even worse. The mother, a young woman but with a face marked by suffering, received them with suspicion, but also with hope. When Lucas explained the proposal, offering a full scholarship, school supplies, food, and even psychological support. The woman couldn't hold back her tears. "Why are you doing this for us?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. Lucas knelt in front of Petey, who was looking at him with wide eyes. "Because someone did this for me when I needed it most, and now it's my turn to pay it forward." That night on the way home, Lucas was quiet in the car. Robert glanced in the rearview mirror. "What are you thinking about?" "About how much everything has changed, Godfather. 4 years ago, I was that boy, asking for change, with no future, no hope. And now I'm helping another boy get the chance I had. It's strange." "It's not strange," Robert replied. "It's a virtuous circle. It's how life should work. People who receive help should help others. And you're doing that at an age when most people are still only thinking about themselves." In the following months, Asphalt Talents grew. 10 more children were selected, each with their own story of struggle and hardship. Lucas made a point of meeting each one personally, listening to their stories, and offering not just financial support, but also emotional encouragement. He became a mentor, a living example that it was possible to succeed. The media remained interested in Lucas's story. He was invited to speak at schools, universities, and even corporate events. Whenever he spoke, he began by telling the story of that day on the highway, about the broken-down car, the can of coins, and the rich man who decided to do more than just pay for a service. And in every speech, he ended with the same message. "We don't choose where we're born. We don't choose if we'll have money or be poor. But we do choose how we treat other people. We choose whether to use what we have to help or to hoard. My godfather chose to help, and that choice changed my life. Now it's up to each of us to make those choices too." Robert, sitting in the audience, was always moved by these words. He thought about how his life had changed, how he had spent decades chasing wealth and power, thinking that would make him happy, and how a chance encounter on an empty road had shown him he was wrong all along. One evening, a few months before Lucas turned 16, the three of them were having dinner together at the house. It was something they did every week now, a tradition none of them wanted to break. Robert looked at Lucas, who had grown so much, not just physically but in every sense, and felt his chest tighten with pride. "Lucas, I need to tell you something," Robert began, his voice serious but full of affection. "I want you to know that you changed my life. I was lost when I found you. I had everything materially, but I had nothing that truly mattered. You gave me purpose, you gave me meaning, and for that I will be eternally grateful." Lucas swallowed hard, moved. "Godfather, I'm the one who's grateful. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You believed in me when even I doubted myself." Marlene, sitting between them, took both their hands. "You two are my family, and I don't know what I did to deserve this, but I thank God every day." They sat there, the three of them, united by a story that began by chance but became destiny, a story of overcoming, of generosity, of love. The following years brought more achievements. Lucas graduated from the technical school with the highest grades in his class. He was accepted into a federal engineering university with a full scholarship. The People's Diagnostic spread throughout the country, helping thousands of mechanics. The Asphalt Talents project expanded to other cities, benefiting hundreds of children. Robert, at 58, became a national reference in corporate social responsibility. His company tripled in size, not in spite of his social projects, but because of them. Consumers valued brands with a purpose, and he had proven that doing good was also good business. Marlene took over as the general coordinator of Asphalt Talents, turning it into a professional and respected non-profit organization. She, who once washed clothes in a shack, now managed a project that changed lives on a national scale. But of all the achievements, the one that mattered most was the simplest. It was the bond that had formed between these three people. The businessman who got lost to find himself, the mother who fought against everything to give her son a better life, and the boy who had a gift and just needed a chance to show it. On the afternoon Lucas turned 16, Robert threw a party at the new house. It was nothing extravagant, just close friends, some schoolmates, the first beneficiaries of Asphalt Talents. Petey, now 12 and already showing the same talent as Lucas, was there, proudly helping serve the guests, proud to be part of that story. In the middle of the party, Robert asked for everyone's attention. He was holding a wrapped box, and when he handed it to Lucas, his eyes were moist. "Lucas, this gift isn't just from me, it's from all of us here, from everyone you've inspired, helped, and touched with your story." Lucas opened the box and found a plaque. It was a commemorative plaque that would be installed on the highway at the exact spot where it all began. The inscription read, "Here, 5 years ago, a chance encounter changed 3 lives forever. May this place remind us that kindness begets kindness, and opportunity begets hope." Lucas couldn't hold back the tears. He hugged Robert tightly, then his mother, and then every single person there, because they were all part of that story in some way. That night, after everyone had gone home, Lucas went out to the backyard and looked up at the starry sky. He thought of his father, who had left too soon, but had left behind a legacy of knowledge and love. He thought of everything he had been through, all the challenges, all the victories, and then he smiled. "Thanks, Dad," Lucas whispered to the stars. "I made you proud of me. I promised I would. And I did." Robert appeared beside him, followed by Marlene. The 3 of them stood there in silence, contemplating the sky. They didn't need to say anything. They knew exactly what each of them was feeling. And there, in that simple but love-filled backyard, they understood the truth that many people go their whole lives without discovering. That wealth is not measured in money. That success is not measured in power. That true greatness lies in making a difference in the lives of others, in giving opportunities, in believing, in loving. All of this had begun on a scorching afternoon, on an empty road, with a broken-down car and a can of coins, an unlikely encounter orchestrated by fate. Or maybe it wasn't fate. Maybe it was just life showing that sometimes, when we least expect it, a door opens, and all we need to do is have the courage to walk through it. Robert Miller walked through that door when he decided to follow Lucas to the shack. Lucas walked through it when he accepted the help and decided to work hard to deserve the chance. Marlene walked through it when she decided to trust a stranger who promised to change their lives. And on the other side of that door, they found something no amount of money in the world could buy. They found family. They found purpose. They found love. The coming years would be filled with new achievements, new challenges, new stories. Lucas would become a renowned engineer, developing new technologies that would help millions. Asphalt talents would expand across the country, changing the lives of thousands of children. Robert would continue to be a successful businessman, but now with a legacy that went far beyond financial numbers. But none of that would matter as much as that moment. There in the backyard under the stars, 3 people, brought together by fate, silently celebrated the journey they had traveled together. From despair to hope, from misery to dignity, from loneliness to family, and all because one day, on an empty road, a rich man learned that sometimes the greatest riches come from the most unlikely places, and a poor boy proved that talent has no address, no social class, no limit. It just needs a chance. And when that chance is given with generosity and received with gratitude, miracles happen. Lives are transformed. The world becomes a little bit better. And that's exactly what happened. On that road, on that day, with a can of coins and a heart willing to believe. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Robert, Marlene, and Lucas has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of overcoming, generosity, and transformation, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most. Was it the encounter on the highway? Lucas's victory at the National Fair? Or perhaps Robert's transformation upon discovering the true meaning of wealth? Every day we bring intense stories like this one, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul and remind us that kindness and opportunity can change destinies. Don't miss the next episode. We'll be waiting for you here, always ready to share more stories that inspire, move, and transform. Until next time.